Nobody go ask if you don't chop. Nobody go send you free money. If you not get now, you sabi. Adulthood na scam.
Adulthood Na Scam is a popular song depicting the travails of being an adult and the responsibility that comes with it. There is no time the enormity of the responsibility dawns more than after graduation. After graduation is the time to make use of and put into practice the knowledge gained by students. However, the current higher education system is still struggling to bridge the gap between school and the workplace for students. The needs of the workplace differ, and something as simple as writing a CV is not taught in the classroom. How to apply what you have learned in school in the workplace is usually a knowledge gap that most graduates struggle with after graduation. Studying a particular course and deeply understanding the career paths available, the jobs available, the way companies and organizations operate, how to get hired, getting the relevant experience needed to get hired, knowing how to sell your skills are all parts of the puzzles that needs to be figured out by the young graduate. Abiola Ogunleye is a final year student of the University of Lagos, and he shares that he expected being in the university to be much more immersive.
I was expecting to, be in a department where, aside theory that I would learn in class, of course I expected to learn theory, history, and all of that, and how to go about things. But I expected university to be like how I saw it in the movies, where you'd have real life projects to undo, you do practicals, you do carry out. So for someone that was going to Masscom, I went to do Masscom with the mindset of possibly being on radio or TV and also journalism. So with the mindset of, okay, being part of the press club, producing newspapers, covering stories in school, producing shows and hosting them in school.
Even in terms of as simple as terms, media terms, like we didn't learn media terms, like even courts, we don't know what courts means. You understand? We don't know what, there are some terms, I'm just talking about terminologies here, like the most basic thing. So when I'm on set for a movie shoot, or when because I did some radio listening, there were some terms that I did not understand, and when you check the terms, like there's some even workshop, they make use of workshops. So sometimes I was like, what's that? And then like people are like, you don't know something as simple as your workshop or the studio or headshots. Terminologies, just terminologies.
With a constantly evolving workforce and without a corresponding update in the school curriculum, the young people who win are those who go out of their way to learn skills required to be employable in the marketplace.
For example, in my school, we have we have the newspaper, we have the radio and TV, but for most of it, you have to be the one that will take the extra effort to be intentionally involved in them. You can just decide to do your coursework away from all of this and just factor it. Except in a few cases, like with the newspaper, where it's actually a course and you have to take it, but it's not compulsory if you don't want to take it. So, and mostly for folks in the print, in the public relations and other departments, there really isn't much of a way for them to practice in school. For now, it's just the newspaper, the print segment, and the broadcast segment that is in school.
TechCabal reported in 2020 that 58.9% of HND graduates are unemployed, 49.55% of OND graduates are unemployed, and 39.75% of BSc holders are unemployed. With the current Nigerian curriculum, there is an even lesser emphasis on soft skills that have gained prominence lately in the workplace. According to Rohan Rajiv, Director of Product Management at LinkedIn, in a Forbes article said, foundational soft skills have become even more important given the rise of remote and autonomous work and are growing in importance across industries, levels, and work environments. Abiola explains that there is no room for soft skills in the classroom during his university education.
I don't think the curriculum or the course itself prepares you for all of that, for soft skills. It's just mostly, what happens is that they mostly focus on the course itself and not the soft skills. Yeah, they try to implement it in terms of maybe when you are doing group projects, you have to collaborate with others. That's teaching you teamwork. You have to do research on your own. You have to do a couple of other things on your own. To learn all of that, it's going to be more of personal development on your own. And I think that's what little associations here, like student associations, would now take up all of that and introduce other aspects that the school is not entirely focusing on. But when it comes to the core academic content is what schools are majorly focusing on delivering.
As many universities strive to update their curriculum and arm students with the skills they require to compete in today's labor force, the onus lies on students to take the extra effort to research, learn, and put themselves out there to get the required knowledge to survive. Some of the ways to prepare for life after school are extra research. Apart from the required coursework, developing an actual interest in what you are studying and researching the career opportunities are important. Having the right knowledge of what is required of you is the first step. This knowledge can help you make informed decisions about the right opportunities to look out for. Consider internship while in school. Even if your coursework doesn't require it, meet professionals in your industry to give you internship opportunities so you can have an experience that will help you both in your academics and when you graduate. Volunteer. Part of exposing yourself to experiences that can expand your network is to volunteer. There are many organizations, bodies that need people to volunteer. When you do, you can meet people, learn skills that will help you in the next step. Bridge your knowledge gap. There are many avenues, centers, online resources available to learn both hard and soft skills to make you more employable in the labor market. Apply for jobs while in school. Even if you don't get them, the experience would challenge you to write CVs and have an understanding of what is required in the job market when you are finally ready. Besides, who knows, you might land one and that would be the start of your career.
"60 Minutes with Angela" starts right now.
So when you serve the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as his special advisor on media and publicity for 8 years, that's 2 unbroken terms, I suppose it makes all the sense to write memoirs. And that's where my guest today comes in. He says, without documentation, revisionism wins because human beings have short memories. He also goes on to say that the reason he's written his memoirs is to help Nigerians know the true and real Muhammadu Buhari, as opposed to the conjuration we have had over decades. His book, Working with Buhari, Reflections of a Special Advisor from 2015 to 2023, was publicly presented on the 16th day of January 2024. And it was the first time the former president, Muhammadu Buhari, would make his way back to the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, since he left office on the 29th of May 2023. Well, Femi Adesina, the former special advisor to former President Muhammadu Buhari on media and publicity, joins me on the program today. Well, thank you for coming on 60 Minutes with me. It's been like 6-7 years of not really having these conversations.
Oh, that long?
But before your appointment as a special advisor, you wore many caps. You would be termed to have reached the height of your profession. You were the managing director of the Sun newspaper. You were also the president of the Nigerian Guild of Editors. That's top, in the hierarchy of journalism in Nigeria. And in spite of your initial misgiving, when you got that call from President Muhammadu Buhari, you served 2 terms as special advisor. Correct me if I'm wrong, you must be the first special advisor to do 8 years with the president since our return to democracy in 1999.
Yes, that would be correct.
Okay. Now, you've spoken about a certain myth about President Muhammadu Buhari, a narrative that his political enemies had sold and fed to the Nigerian public. What is this myth?
Over the years, you know that he first came as a military ruler.
Yes.
That's December 31, 1983 to August 27, 1985. And he ruled with an iron fist. That gave people the excuse to now say he was a dictator. When he came out in 2002 saying he had become a Democrat, they didn't believe him.
Yes.
They felt it could never happen. In fact, they felt he would be a worse dictator than he was as a military leader if he was ever elected. So there began systematic demarketing of the man Buhari. He's a dictator, he's a religious bigot, he's a Muslim zealot, he is a man who doesn't have a wide perspective of the country, he is too clannish, narrow,
Yeah.
and all that. All sorts of perspectives which were not correct. They succeeded in selling that to Nigerians in 2003, 2007, and 2011. So he didn't win the election in those years. But by 2015, Nigerians were not ready to buy those things again. Those arguments had become prosaic, jejune, and Nigerians just said, this is the man we want, and they voted him in. So a lot of people changed their minds about him, voted him, but there were some who remained in their entrenched positions. That was why, having then worked closely with him for 8 years and seen that he is none of those things they paint him to be, I just felt I'll write a book to put things in their proper perspectives.
And the book was well received by him. I just wondered, when you showed him the manuscript, because I know after you left office, you disappeared for a few months to finish the book.
Yes.
And then you got back and you went straight to see him in Daura.
Yes.
What was his reaction to the book?
Yeah, when I gave him the manuscript, the first thing he did was to go to the contents page.
Yes.
And when he looked at the titles of each chapter, some he will read and laugh, and then some he will just smile and nod. At the end of the day, he said, Nigerians will love to read this book. Nigerians will love to read this book. He flipped through the pages. There were some areas I asked him, I mentioned this. Should I remove it? He said, leave it. It's part of our history. Leave it there. Now that the book is out, I see them playing up all those in the media and trying to make mischief with it. I just laugh. They didn't know that even the former president had
And
known
approved.
and approved those parts to be
Okay,
there.
so I was reading one of the comments on Twitter. Someone said in reaction to your book that, it looks like this Mr. Adeshino, he don't plan this book. He knew that he was going to write these memoirs from day one. Your power of recollection is what they couldn't get over. So I suppose my question is, when you get an appointment such as that, is that the first thing that comes to your mind? I've got to start preparing for my memoirs. Or when does the idea come in?
Not exactly. If you asked me along the line, are you going to write? I would say maybe yes, maybe no.
Yes.
I wasn't quite sure whether I would write or not. So it was not as if I went into government planning to write at the end of it all.
Yes.
I could have written and I may not have written. I just sometime when we finished decided that, okay, I will write. So it was not as if I went into government planning to
Deliberately.
write this. Let me tell you an encounter between myself and the then General Buhari on phone. The first time he called me was the build-up towards the 2007 election. I had written an article about him in the Sun newspapers. The following day, my phone just rang. And he said, this is Muhammadu Buhari. I said, which Buhari? He started laughing, and I just started laughing. I said, General! And then we started talking. He said, I read the article. He said, you must have the memory of an elephant. All those things you know there, how did you remember them? That was pre-2007. Okay. So most of the things in this book too, yes, some were jotted in the course of working in government, some were
Retained.
recalled. Yes, I retained and then
knowledge.
recalled at the time I was writing.
So one of the more controversial topics that you touch upon in your book is that of Nnamdi Kanu, who is, by the way, still detained, been detained since June 2021. You alluded to the fact that if Nnamdi Kanu was not extradited to Nigeria, he would have been eliminated.
No. That was a twist
Right.
of what I wrote. I read that twist,
Yes.
which is not correct. What the president said when the high-level delegation from the southeast came to the president, pleading that he released Nnamdi Kanu to them, they pledged that he would be of good behavior. And the president said what they were asking him was very difficult. One, because it was already a judicial matter, and he never likes to interfere with the judiciary. Once something is before the courts, he wants the courts to adjudicate on it. And then secondly, he said to them, you asked me to release him unconditionally. He said, it's like a boy who stood outside and began to throw stones into his own house.
Yes.
Then why should he be released unconditionally? He said, we are a government. If we had wanted to kill Nnamdi Kanu, even abroad, we could have arranged it.
Yeah.
But we decided to bring him back home so that he can have his day in court and justify all the allegations he had leveled against the country. He said the country is a zoo. Let him say it before the court.
Yes.
So the president said, we did him a favor by bringing him home so that he can justify all the allegations he has leveled against Nigeria. There was no plan to assassinate him, and the president said, we could have if we wanted because we're a government. Said, but that didn't come into our thoughts at all. We preferred that he be brought home so that he could justify all the
Or what he had been saying.
Yeah.
One of the most interesting recollections for me in that is the Emilio Con episode. And the decision, as you put it, by the principal aides of former president to brief him when you were airborne. I think you were on a travel
Yes, from
with the
Spain. Yes.
president in Spain then. So you all decided that once you were airborne, you as his advisor would approach him so that, according to you guys, you didn't want him to get a varied and distorted version. Now, we all remember that speech of Emilio Con. What could a varied and distorted version look like that would be worse than the perception and implication that those words had already created, on that fateful day in Abeokuta? I'm trying to see why your team thought it was important to brief the president, and why you thought it was possible for a varied and distorted version to be given to the president.
Now, when something happens, look at the newspapers and the news media generally. They take it from different perspectives. Some on point, some off point. Look at stories that have been written from this book, for instance. A lot have been distorted.
Yes.
So that was why we felt the president was going to land in Nigeria. He would read the newspapers, and then we didn't want it to be a surprise to him when he saw all the headlines and the papers going in different directions. He will now be wondering what is the truth.
Yes.
That was why we held that meeting, that once we were airborne, I should approach him and brief him on all that had happened, which I did.
What was his reaction?
You know, he's a man of few words, very few words. He listened to me patiently, and that's one of his strong points. He listens. Anybody talking to him, he listens patiently. And after it, he said, Asiwaju said all that?
I'm surprised.
He's surprised. He said, Asiwaju said all that? And then he said, thank you for coming to brief me. That was it. And that was it. And that was it. But later I learned that, later when you go to Asiwaju met him, and I think...
the iron things out.
Yes, the iron things out.
Because, you know, I'm thinking to many of us observers who were watching the events leading up to the election, that speech would be said to have been targeted at the former president. It looked like a resistance. You know, of course, some of the current president's supporters have always thought that President Buhari was lukewarm at best to President Tinubu's ambition. And so in saying, Emilio Kong, it is my turn, you know, no one can stop me. No matter what you all throw at me, this is my turn. Especially if you recall, he used the words Olule. He tried the first time, Olule. Tried the second time, Olule. So everyone thought there's only one person who's tried to be president 3 times, and it's President
It was not
Buhari.
in doubt that he was talking about President Buhari. It was not in doubt. But then you see that immediately after that speech openly in Abeokuta, there was a press statement from Bayo Onanuga, who was a spokesman to the presidential campaign then, putting things in proper perspective. It's also in my book. You said lukewarm. Lukewarm is not the word I'll use. Neutral is the one I prefer to use. If a sitting president is lukewarm towards you,
Nothing will happen.
Nothing will happen. If you know the power that resides in the presidency, you will know that if a sitting president is lukewarm towards you or doesn't want you, nothing will happen in your favor.
Yes.
The president was just neutral, and he allowed things to play out. And
He wanted a level playing field
which he ensured
with
was
all
a-
the candidates. Okay,
Yes.
so till today, some of Asiwaju's supporters still have it in their minds that President Buhari didn't want Tinubu as his successor.
They have a right to their opinion. But recall that even against the electoral law, when the president voted in Daura, he displayed his ballot, showing that he voted APC. So, how else will a man prove that he wanted somebody as his successor than that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, but you know, there's no doubt that the APC seems to have many blocks, and that's understandable. The 4 parties came together to form that party. Did you, as the head of the Buhari media team, feel at some point that the campaign of Asiwaju was distancing itself from the achievements of the administration that you served? In the run-up to the campaign, when the campaign first started, it looked as if they were going to be campaigning on the achievements of then Governor Bola Ahmed Tinubu as Governor of Lagos, rather than riding on the many achievements of a Buhari in the last 8 years, in which were the pioneer years of the APC at the presidency.
I didn't get that feeling. Maybe if that perception, and he goes out, I go out with him. If you see how people still respond, I don't have that impression that the Tinubu campaign wanted to distance itself from the achievements of President Buhari. And many times, President Tinubu has also said that Buhari was like their precursor. And when they met at this book launch, you heard what he said.
In fact, people were surprised that the president turned up at your book launch. Everyone thought, we'll see if Tinubu really turns up.
He gave his word.
And he did.
Yes, because I sent him an invitation, and the feedback I got was that he said, if he's feeling additional, I'll come. He is a good person. And since President Buhari is in town, I must be there as a sitting president. And he was true to his word.
Well, we'll take a break now. Join us again after the break. All right, welcome back. And I still want to stay on this issue of the alleged friction between the former president and, one of the things that the current president's supporters hold on to is that currency change, the Naira redesign. At the time it happened, the general word on the street was that a lot of politicians had hoarded Naira notes, and President Buhari had been briefed about that hoarding, and that in order to have clean elections, there was a decision taken to change the currency so that it would make it difficult for politicians to buy the votes from the electorate. What would be your reaction to Tinubu supporters who think that that singular policy was directed at them so that it would make it difficult for them to get people to vote for the APC?
Why would it be difficult for the APC and not for other parties? If it affected APC, it must affect PDP, it must affect Labour, it must affect all the other parties. The one thing leaders must know is that they need to be careful of what their supporters say. They need to discern carefully, otherwise they will cause problem between them and other leaders. So, if the Naira redesign policy was to give us cleaner elections, was it only one person that was going to the election? Was it only one party that was going to the election? So if it affected one party, it must affect all the parties. And no doubt, President Buhari still keeps saying that, do you know that in that election, 9 governors who wanted to go to the Senate couldn't win their elections? Do you see governors ever failing elections?
The retirement
home. Well, we failed during that election. So we had cleaner election. It was not targeted at any single politician or any party, but we had cleaner election. And do you also recall that even during that time, kidnapping stopped? Because if you kidnap anybody and you ask for ransom, there was no cash to bring. I remember that in Kano, was it the APC secretary that was kidnapped? Day 1, day 2, day 3? Nothing. Nobody answered their call, nobody brought.
In the polity about whether or not the president was properly briefed, whether or not the then CBN governor had the capacity to push forward this policy. Were we prepared for that Naira redesign?
Yes, I was privy to most of the things that happened as build-up to that redesign. How many times Godwin Emefiele came to meet with the president, meetings they held which I sat in, and I had to issue statements and all that. So I guess the policy was properly enunciated.
Yeah.
The actual implementation may not have been as seamless as it should be, but the enunciation was good, and the president was convinced that it was the way to go.
Yeah.
If you read this book, he spoke about it.
Are any of you who are the members of the media team of Buhari surprised that sometimes when you read the papers or you listen to current members of this administration, it would seem that the government of Buhari is being vilified by members of the same party? I still remember the current National Security Advisor, Nuhu Ribadu, talking about how this administration inherited almost nothing in terms of kind of economy, and some of them saying things like, oh, the country was run aground for the last 8 years by President Muhammadu Buhari. I mean, the shocking thing for many people is that both Buhari and Tinubu are from the same party. And we're surprised that from the same party would come such harsh words about the former president.
Well, I ascribe it to limited knowledge. If you have limited knowledge about something, what should you do? Try to understand it.
Yes.
Try to read up, try to get information. But if you begin to speak without having done that, the shallowness will come out. So it was limited to say what he said. And do you know the response of President Buhari to us privately? He said, leave them. Everything is documented. That's what he said. So everything is documented.
So he's not worried, he's not fearful if there's a probe?
Not at all. During this launch, he was talking about the importance of documentation. That was what he meant. He said nothing was done under the veil of secrecy under his administration, and everything is on record. So those who said what they said, if they had sought to look at the records, they would have been better educated, and so would not have said what they said.
Did the president have a preferred successor in that last election?
He was neutral. One, if you had a preferred successor, the power that resides in the office of a president is so enormous, nothing will have stopped
that person from emerging.
Nothing will have stopped.
So when the former Senate president, it was implied that it was President Buhari's choice, that wasn't true at all.
There was a statement that came saying the president hadn't endorsed anybody. Okay.
He didn't endorse his vice president either.
Not anybody. He just said, please go to the primaries, let the best person win. Whoever emerges.
And he received many visits from everyone who was aspiring.
Oh yes, that's the right thing to do. He was a father of the country. So a good father should create a level playing field and bless anybody aspiring.
But you know that all those who were coming to tell him were obviously coming to tell him because, they thought...
They were endorse them.
Yes.
Well, maybe they didn't know President Buhari enough. Those of us that know him know that he's such a fair-minded person. If he does something and he thinks he has wronged another person in that process, no, he would rather not do it. He's a person who is always mindful of the last day when Allah will ask him questions and judge him. Yeah. This is what he told me. You get to see it in that book later. When there was talk about lopsided appointments in the country, particularly in the area of security, the day he called me to announce Lawal Daura as DGDSS, he had removed Itai Ekpeyong from South-South. So I said, Mr. President, tongues are wagging that you are appointing too many people from the north. You have removed a man from South-South. Why not replace him with another person from the South-South? He now told me that when he's going to fill positions like that, a committee is set up, a search team is set up, and they work. At the end of the day, they come with 3 recommendations. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
With number 1 being the best, number 2 second best, number 3 also appointable. Most times, 90, 95 out of 100 in 8 years, President Buhari will always approve number 1. And what he told me that day was, if somebody has come first in that exercise, and because of his religion, or because of his ethnicity, or because of language, or because of anything, and I bypass him and appoint another person. Say, Allah will judge me on the day of judgment.
So it didn't matter what part of the country you were from, if you were the next in line.
If you were the best in the exercise, it didn't matter where you came from. And like I observed in the book, that's a bit ahead of its time in Nigeria. Because Nigeria not only would look at everything from the area of where you hail from, they will look at it from religion. So President Buhari didn't countenance all that. He just went for the best in any exercise.
Let me bring you back now to your relationship with the late Chief of Staff, Abba Kyari. I was shocked to read that there was a fractured relationship between yourself and him. Did he perhaps favor someone else for your post?
Fractured will not be my word. Frosty will not be my word. I'll just say not convivial. We didn't have that kind of relationship that you would think a special advisor would. His successor, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, I had a better relationship with him.
Yes.
Because the day he resumed, he said, Femi, just take me as a big uncle. Yeah. And anything I needed to discuss, I went straight to him. The late Abba Kyari didn't have that kind of disposition. He was a bit aloof. And you are the way you are. You can't help it. Yeah. If that was the way he was made, no problem. What you probably have read about my relationship from him were the excerpts people took from that book, which was not complete. For you to get a complete picture of my relationship with him, read the entire chapter, A Tale of Two Chiefs of Staff. When you read it, everything will fall into place. The video just took what will sound good, what the readers will like, and what will reverberate and
will latch on.
Will latch on to. If you read the entire story of my relationship with him, how I mourned him when he passed on.
I know.
I genuinely felt it when he passed on, because I would have wanted him to finish with the administration and
because it got me thinking that were you an outsider when Buhari brought you in? I think if not the first appointment, the first 2-3 appointments that President Buhari made.
Yes.
And a lot of people were shocked. I wasn't, but we all knew your relationship with the then General Buhari.
Yes.
So I thought, okay, was it that he considered you to be an outsider brought in?
I wouldn't think so, because he just needed to know what was the background between me and General Buhari, who later became President Buhari, and then he wouldn't consider me an outsider. As far back as 2013, when my mother died, President Buhari came to attend the commendation service we did for her in Lagos, a Christian service, and he stayed all through. So I was still active in the media during the campaign, but I was giving support from the outside. And that was what I thought I would give even to the administration, support from outside.
Yeah.
But eventually when I was invited to come, it took me a while to decide to go. You will see that the very day I had to resign my appointment as Son MD and President Guild of Editors, I began to cry, because I didn't want to leave uncertainty for uncertainty. I had never worked in government before. I didn't know how it would be, and but because it was President Buhari, that was why I went.
You made a point that you never worked in government before. Is it that the opportunity never came? You didn't actively seek it, or you just were not interested?
I was not interested. And I remember that one of my active readers in the media, Jafet is his name, he sought me out one day. He came to the Sun and said, I want to meet the person who writes this thing week after week. So he came and we got talking. And then he asked me, would you ever serve in government? I said, no. Straight, I said, no. Then I thought about it again and I modified my position. I said, well, I can serve in the government headed by Muhammadu Buhari. That was what I told him. That was my conviction then. Any other person apart from Muhammadu Buhari, I wouldn't have taken.
So now, if you're called upon to serve, like in your home state or Osun State, for instance, would you be open to that?
After 8 years, You get tired, don't you? After 8 years, I felt I had done my bit. Out of 200 million Nigerians,
Yes.
and sat for 8 years, more than my fair share.
And you also call it a thankless job.
Well, they call it so, but me, I wouldn't call it so. You remember, if you read that book, you will see the encounter between me and the Sultan of Sokoto. He had known me before I took on the assignment. He calls me Kuli Kuli after my email address. So, the very week I was appointed, he came to the villa, he saw me, he said, Kuli Kuli, this job you have come to do, he said, with your predecessors, it has been a thankless job. He said, but with you, it shall not be so. And I said amen to it. So today, I don't see it as a thankless job. It was a tough job, no doubt, but not thankless.
I remember when you were appointed and you coined that phrase, wailing wailers. You know, your strict loyalty to President Muhammadu Buhari. I've always wanted to know your reaction to critics who said that statement, wailing wailers, was unbecoming of a presidential spokesperson.
There's a perspective. Perspectives are free. They have the right to it. But you know the truth about the wailing wailers was that it was directed at the PDP and Olisa Metu, their spokesman.
Yes.
In the first few months in office, you find that President Buhari could not do anything right. Anything he did, Olisa Metu will issue a statement. If it rained heavily, he will issue a statement. If it didn't rain at all, it was Buhari's fault. If you saw a wall gecko in his house, Buhari turned to that wall gecko. And all that. One day I now said, what is this? I now did a tweet that these people, they are forgetting that they have lost power. And they will be out of power for a long time. Wailing wailers. That was my tweet. Now, it was directed at Olisa Metu and his party. But anti-Buhari elements online say, oh, he's abusing us, he has called us wailing wailers. So they appropriated that tag to themselves. If they decided to appropriate it, I left them. They were welcome to take it.
Welcome back to my concluding moments now with former special advisor to former President Muhammadu Buhari, Femi Adesina. All right, so two major issues that made Buhari trend. I mean, very, very major issues. One, Jubril Al-Sudan, and of course his purported wedding to the Humanitarian Affairs Minister, Sefia Omar. I mean, they even printed invitations. We heard Professor Shimbaji when he gave that anecdote at the launch saying, you know, he wanted to sue people who he felt had defamed him, and the president said, at least they didn't print IV for you. People were even calling color. Color will not move. So, I want to get what happens in the villa when issues like this come up. Give us a real look into how the president reacts to those sorts of stories in conversations with you. Because I know you've told me that he reads the papers voraciously and you brief him every morning on, you know, issues that you
By
think
10 a.m. he wants to see.
he wants to know what is going on. So what was his reaction to that Jubril Al-Sudan first?
Well, the Jubril of Sudan was foolishness. It was completely obtuse. He left the country in January on a medical trip. He came back in March, went again in April, and came back finally in August. August 19 to be precise. The day he arrived, I remember that the then Chief of Defense Staff, General Gabriel Olonishaki, was giving out his daughter in wedding. So I went to attend that wedding, and naturally I was in Agbada and cap. Before I left for church, I had got a message that he would be arriving that day, that I should inform Nigerians. So I issued a statement. From the church, we went to the reception. I left the reception about 3 o'clock.
Yes.
The president was to land at 4, and I didn't feel I should go